Mystical memories of past lives. My son's name is Rodion. When he was 3, he suddenly asked me, "Mom, why do you call me Rodion? My name is Andre." I was stunned and started asking questions. Turns out, he remembered living in France and being killed in a battle. Then he said, "After that, I sat on a cloud for a long time, waiting until I could come to you. Ever since I can remember, I've had this strange image in my head, like I was once a man, living by the sea. It was cold, I wore rubber boots, had a wife and a daughter, and we spoke English. The clothes looked like something from the 1980s. That family still feels real to me, like they still remember and love me somewhere." When my daughter was about 2 or 3, something happened that I'll never forget. She doesn't remember it at all, she's 17 now. I heard her in her room, softly rocking something in her arms, singing. But there was no doll. I asked, "Who are you playing with?" She said, "With my little baby." "What's her name?" I don't remember, something hard to say. But her last name is the same as mine. I froze. We didn't have any other kids, and I'd never had a miscarriage or anything like that. I called my husband, joking, "Hey, don't tell me you've got another secret baby somewhere," and told him what happened. He suddenly got serious and said, "Ask her if the baby's name was Gulnara." I asked, and my daughter's eyes lit up. "Yes. That's her. Baby Gulnara." My husband went pale. Turns out, before he was born, his parents had a daughter named Gulnara who passed away as an infant. He'd never met her, even I didn't know that story until that moment. For about 25 years, every time I saw a knife, I felt a sharp cut on my right cheek. No wound, just the sensation. I can't explain it. It stopped about 7 years ago. Maybe something from another life? Once, I was traveling with friends in Tbilisi. Around 1 a.m., we went for a walk, and suddenly, everything felt familiar. Streets, corners, buildings, I knew where to go. At first, my friends joked, but then they got quiet. I led them through the city like I'd lived there all my life. Then, I had this deep feeling that I was about to see someone I once loved, like a mother or grandmother. I'm from Yakutsk, by the way. My real mom was at home. I didn't tell the girls, we just went back to the hotel. The next day, I didn't dare to go again. But on the way, we met an old Georgian man leading a donkey. My mom always told me that when I was 2 or 3, I used to cry and say, "But what about my donkeys? Who will take care of them without me?" She said I sounded so serious that it gave her chills. When my daughter was 4, she calmly told me, I was killed at school. Someone came and started shooting, and I didn't make it. My son, when he was 2, once ran up to me during playtime and said, "You're not my mom." I laughed it off, but then he told me his real mom was Alia and his dad was Boris, both doctors who were gone now. We didn't know anyone with those names. We never watched war movies or anything like that. He has a speech delay, but he used to speak in his own language. Once, I was putting him down for a nap when he suddenly sat up and started talking to someone invisible, like having a real conversation. I finally snapped and said out loud, "Guys, whatever you're discussing, it's bedtime for a child." He looked at me sadly, waved toward the empty space, and lay down to sleep. When my daughter was 3.5, I asked, "How did you choose me as your mom?" She said, "I was flying and flying, then I took your hand." It gave me chills. During pregnancy, I used to feel weird fluttering inside, like tiny scratches. Everyone in my family remembers it. After she was born, she'd always grab my little finger before falling asleep, and she still does sometimes. When my son was about 5, he told me he used to rescue people from drowning in the sea. He loves the ocean, always has. Once, we went to clean my husband's father's grave and took our youngest son, who was about 3. It was his first time at a cemetery. He sat under a tree, playing quietly. I told him, "Your grandpa is buried here." He looked up and said, "No, Mom. He's right there. We're playing together. I also have this recurring memory of drowning, not in the ocean, but in muddy swamp water. And there's one more mystery. I still don't know how my daughter came to us. At that time, my husband and I weren't even close. I was nursing our older baby, thought my cycle hadn't come back yet. When I finally took a cheap expired test just in case, I almost fainted. I was pregnant. A few years later, my daughter, about 3 years old, said, "I had another mom before you." I asked who. She said, "Lena." Lena is my sister, who lost her newborn daughter a few days after birth. One day my daughter said, "I fell into a hole on March 8th. My father actually died falling through a gap in the stairs, the night of March 7th to 8th, 2002. 13 years ago, when I was going through a divorce, something strange happened. For 3 nights in a row, I kept hearing a child's voice in my head saying, "I want to come into the world through you." At that moment, I honestly thought I was losing my mind. I was getting divorced, and suddenly some child's voice was talking to me. But what really stuck with me was that the child didn't call me mom. I could even see him in my mind, clear as day. A year later, someone offered me to become a surrogate mother. And suddenly it all came back, that voice. I said, "Yes, I'll do it. It's going to be a boy." The biological mom laughed, but when only one embryo survived, a boy, exactly as I described him, she stopped laughing. They live in Germany now, I'm in Greece, and we still text sometimes. Once I joked, "Remember when you laughed at me?" She said, "Yeah, it's not funny anymore." When she told her son the story of how he was born, he simply said, "I know, Mom. I was the one who chose her." When I once asked my own son how he chose me, he shrugged and said, "I just took the first one I saw." When I was little, I once told my mom about how they dropped the Tsar bell and a big piece broke off. We didn't even have a TV back then, I couldn't have known that story. When my daughter was about 3, we visited Thailand for the first time. We went to a temple on a tour. I looked away for just a second, and she was gone. We searched everywhere, panicking. 10 minutes later, we found her sandals neatly placed in front of a forbidden section of the temple. I ran inside. She was sitting cross-legged in front of a Buddha statue, eyes closed, hands folded in prayer. There weren't even monks there that day. She'd never seen anything like that in her life. We forgot about it until she turned 13 and became obsessed with Buddhism, studying mantras, asking to visit temples. When we reminded her of that story, she said, "I've always known Christianity isn't my path. I want to follow this one." My other daughter, around 3, was playing in the bath, pouring water between cups, singing in some strange language. I asked, "What are you doing?" She said, "Making a potion." I used to be a witch. I laughed, "And what's that song you're singing?" She replied, "It's in the Muron language. It's dead now. Nobody remembers it." Later I googled it, and nearly fell off my chair. The Muron language was real. When my youngest was about 3, we were walking home from daycare, talking about last names. I told her mine, including my maiden name. She stopped and said, "When I was big and you were little, I had that same last name. Only my grandfather ever had that name, and he passed when I was 10. When I was 5, I told my mom I knew when my dad would die, at 47, and something about the number 4. He died at 47, on January 4th. He'd swallowed a fish bone, it was removed, everything was fine, until a nurse accidentally gave him the wrong blood type. My 5-year-old daughter once asked me if I remembered when she was 10 and had braces, and when she got married at 24. She's 5. I believe in the memory of souls. For years I had one recurring dream, always the same. I was walking through a huge burned-down house, trying to reach the first floor. Everything was blackened, broken. For years I wandered those dream hallways until I finally found a staircase and went down. There, in a drawer, I found a photograph that somehow survived the fire. In it, I was a young woman in a gown from the Romanov era, standing with my parents, brother, and sister. After that, the dream never came back. Even now, 20 years later, I remember every detail. Another time, I dreamed I was a woman in Europe. Early 1980s, driving a red car, running my own business, with 2 sons. I died in a car crash. Since childhood, I've had a deep fear of cars, especially red and white ones. When my nephew was 5, we were playing with toy cars. One of them was a police car. He suddenly said, "I used to have one like this." I said, "Of course, you have plenty of toys." He looked at me and said, "No. A real one." I was a police officer. "You were my daughter." I froze. He went on, "Someone called and said there was trouble at home. When I got there, my wife was standing on the balcony with our daughter, and she jumped." He described everything, the balcony, the crying, the fall. I couldn't even speak. My son once asked, "Why did you want a daughter so badly that I had to wait so long to come?" And I understood. My ex-husband and I lost 3 pregnancies, all girls. We divorced, and later I became pregnant again. I prayed for just a healthy baby, any gender. And my son came. He told me once that he'd been sitting on a cloud, and God said, "Pick your mom, how about Svetlana?" And he said, "No, I'll wait for Dasha." He even chose his own name. I called him Ivan my entire pregnancy, but a week before giving birth, I asked him to give me a sign if he wanted another name. That same day, my aunt said out of nowhere, "Why not name him Jaeger?" It hit me like lightning. So Jaeger he became. Once I dreamed I was a young pilot, 23 years old, wearing a Soviet uniform, walking with a friend near a forest road. Then came the sound of motorcycles, shouting in German. We hid in the grass as soldiers passed, escorting women and children. It all felt too real. Later, in the dream, my friend and I were captured and executed. I woke up shaking, heart pounding, like I had lived it. When my son was about 4, he told me he used to live with another mother. He said his name was Zenaida. He took care of his sick elderly mother until she passed, and then he died too. He said he'd been very lonely. Now he doesn't remember any of that, but I do. Another time, when he was 3.5, he told me he and his little sister were riding in a carriage with their nanny when bandits attacked. He said the nanny and his sister were killed first, then him. And then he said softly, "I just want you to love me more this time." My son was conceived through IVF. For those who don't know, after the embryo transfer, you lie still for about an hour. As I was lying there alone, I suddenly saw, as clear as day, a little boy, about 2 years old. He looked at me, said his name, and disappeared. Neither I nor my husband had ever heard that name before, but we gave it to him. And even though it was way too early to know if the procedure worked, I already knew I was pregnant, and it was a boy. When I was a child, I once dreamed that I was in a concentration camp. Everything was brown and yellow, hot summer, mud everywhere. I was Jewish, standing naked beside my mother or sister, being pushed forward. I could feel the fear, the humiliation, the end. That dream still lives in me. When my daughter was 3, she kept asking, "Mom, why were you so sad before?" I asked, "When before?" She said, "Before I was born. I was sitting on a tree, watching you cry. Then I jumped into your tummy so you'd smile again." A few months later, she started saying, "There's a baby sister in your belly." And she was right, I was pregnant. Now she says it's time to go pick up her brother. And honestly, that part still gives me chills. Until I was about 30, I kept dreaming I was dancing on a cobblestone street in Italy, proud, cold, not caring about anyone. Later, during regression therapy, I saw that life, I was a dancer in Italy who died young and alone. In this life, I'm the opposite, I adore people, kids, animals. I've had 3 children and care for stray dogs and cats. Maybe that's my second chance to love the world I once ignored. When my son was 3, he pointed at a manhole cover and said, "That's where I drowned when I was little. The water was sour. But now I'm your Dennis." My daughter, up until around 4, used to say her name used to be Nastia. And that she was killed during a war. When my daughter was about 2 or 3, she kept talking about a huge clock, a tower, and chimes. "I've been there," she'd say. I couldn't figure out what she meant. She had never seen anything like that. One day she saw a photo of Big Ben in a magazine and shouted, "Mom! That's the clock I told you about." My little boy had just started speaking. He walked into the kitchen with his toy phone and said, "Alla, Alachka, my little daughter." My legs almost gave out. My mom passed 9 years ago, and she was the only one who called me that. He'd never heard anyone say it before. When I asked who said that to him, he replied, "My grandma said it on the phone." A year later, I showed him old family photos for the first time. And he pointed right at my late mother. "That's my grandma Galia." I broke down crying. When my son was around 3, he told me he used to be an angel living in the sky, picking out parents. He said, "I chose you right away, Mom." But I thought about Dad for a long time. I picked him hoping he'd stop drinking once I got here. Back then my husband drank a lot. Now my son is 13 and remembers nothing of it. But sometimes, when he was little, he'd look at me with eyes that seemed much, much older. When I was 2 or 3, I suddenly asked my mom, "Do you remember when we lived in that big city?" She said, "What city?" "Paris," I said, a word I couldn't possibly know back then. We lived in a small town, no one ever mentioned Paris. And now, as an adult, I actually hate that city. Everyone calls it the city of love. But for me it feels wrong. When my oldest son was about 3 or 4, he used to cry, saying he wanted to go home to his real parents, on his own planet. He'd sob uncontrollably. As he grew up, he stopped. I still don't know if it was imagination, or something else. Before my son was born, I had a dream. I was in a garden, picking apples. All around me were children. I somehow knew they were the souls of children who'd passed. A little boy in a light blue suit walked up to me and asked, "Will you take me?" I said yes, and he took my hand, telling me, "You're my sister." When I told my mom the next morning, she turned pale. She said when I was a baby, she'd lost a pregnancy, it was a boy. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant again. Just a few days ago, my 3-year-old and I were having lunch. He was being silly, and I was feeding him. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he said, "When you were little, I used to feed you. Remember?" I laughed. "Oh? You were my dad?" He shook his head. "No. I was your mom. But sometimes I wanted to eat you too." He burst out laughing, then stopped. And went back to eating quietly. My daughter, whenever she visits her grandma's bathroom, points at the sponge and says, "When Grandpa was little, I used to wash him with that sponge." When my son was about 4 and had a high fever, he once said calmly, "In 5 billion years, the moon will be gone. And all life on Earth will end." It sent chills down my spine. My friend's son, when he was 3, cried hysterically one night, screaming that the soldiers shot my son. When my daughter was 3, she said to me, "Do you know why I chose you? You were so sad, you cried so much, and no one loved you. So I decided to come and hug you." A year before I got pregnant, my mom, my closest person, passed away. I never told my daughter anything about that. And no one else did either. My son used to wake up screaming at night until he was 4. When he finally learned to talk, he told us the same thing every time. Soldiers killed my mom. I was home with my little brother, and she never came back. Even now, he clings to me, he's terrified of being left alone. Though I never leave him anywhere. When I was about 3, my great-grandmother looked after me while Mom worked. One day, when Mom came home, Grandma said, "Alessia broke a cup today." I scolded her a little. And I apparently said, "Grandma, do you remember when you broke a cup when you were little? I scolded you then too." My grandma froze, that had really happened. Her mother had scolded her for it when she was a child. When my daughter was 5, she told us. That long ago her name was Eva. She had light hair. And she drowned in a river while her mom screamed and cried. When I asked how old she'd been, she said, 6. I was about to start school. I asked, "Why did you remember this now?" She said, "Because I remember Mom crying. And I felt sorry for her. But it had to happen." When my son was 3, he was terrified of water. One day he said, "They killed me when I was herding sheep in the mountains. I was still alive when they threw me in the water." One day our youngest son said something that gave both me and my husband chills. He looked at us very seriously and said, "I was an old grandpa. I walked around your house for a long time, and then you called me, so I came." When he was little, he used to grunt like an old man. And would walk with his hands behind his back, just like a grandpa taking his evening stroll. When my son was 3, he told me he used to live with his cousin. The one who actually lives in Novosibirsk. But they lived together in the city of Sochi. He said he used to drive fast cars, crashed, and then started looking for us, his new mom and dad. What's strange is that I got pregnant in Sochi, and my son was born in St. Petersburg. He's terrified of speed and hates anything extreme, won't even get on a roller coaster. And here's the creepiest part, around the same age, my nephew suddenly said out of nowhere, "Grandpa will die when I turn 10. My daughter, until she was about 5, used to talk non-stop about the place up high. She said everyone there could fly. And from Earth, you couldn't see them. If you want to go down to Earth, she'd say, you have to choose your mom, she's the one with the red light. Then they give you a head and a tail. And you go to your mom. She also said that before you're born, you can even choose your own illnesses." She told me she decided not to hear. Because in her last life she was so tired of all the noise. She was born with partial hearing loss. And often takes off her hearing aids, saying, "I just want silence."